How's it going, everybody? This is Cameron White with White Light Astrology, and welcome to your favorite weekly horoscope. What the fuck is going on in the universe for not even March, we're in April 1st through April 8th. And as you guys can tell, I made making some changes to my name. Let me know if you guys like that name and this title a little bit better. I took you guys' feedback, I got it, no music. There will never be music in my videos again, and I appreciate your guys' honest feedback so much. You guys were so nice about that. Wanted to try something different, figured Mercury's, was retrograde on top of Neptune, and Pisces figured, hey, let's try some music and see what happens. Glad to know that you guys don't like it, because it's a lot of work, so it's less work for me to do it, so I'm not going to do it anymore. But, anyway, this week is going to be pretty interesting. I mean, last week, what did we come off of? We had Mars enter Gemini, we had Venus enter Pisces, we had, a nice little energy change. This week's highlights on Monday this week, starting off this week, we still have Mercury conjoining Neptune, as it's, Mercury's now direct and moving forward. It's still right on top of Neptune, still making things a little bit foggy and blurry and still just confusing and all over the place. So, I feel like this is like a captain's log of like day 1000, nothing makes sense anymore. And, I made a tweet about that and it still cracks me up. But this week we also have the South Node conjoining Pluto exactly on Thursday. Now, on my last week video, I talked about that and that we were going to be going into that this week. And in my monthly horoscopes, I talked about that basically being like for the whole month. Like the South Node is going to be on Pluto for quite some time. Now, it hits exactly on Thursday. And as well on Thursday, we're going to have Saturn jump into the last decan of Capricorn, hitting 20 degrees where it's going to eventually come back later on this year. And it's going to conjoin Pluto for that big Saturn-Pluto conjunction. And I really think it's just important that Saturn's hitting this last final, stage of Capricorn. I don't want to say we're almost done, but we are less than a year from Saturn entering Aquarius. As well this week, we have the new moon in Aries, which is really exciting. I think that this is going to really kind of pump us up going into this week, help us, reset our intentions, get our energy right. And I really think that this is kind of like the one spark that we need this week. There's not a whole lot of things going on this week, but I do think that this is really going to set the tone for moving forward into April, and especially as, Venus is going to later conjoin Neptune as we go into next week, and basically all the stuff that we got going on next week. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the horoscope. So, starting off today on Monday, April 1st, happy, or not even happy, but April Fool's Day, Mercury's on top of Neptune exactly today. We have the moon entering Pisces today, and it's conjoining Venus. This is a lot of Pisces energy, and I hit on this at the end of my video of last week. And at the end of the day, Pisces energy is still, very obscure. It doesn't have, clear lines or definitions. It's kind of like, this is why I use like the, the analogy of like the fog, or like, blurring. It's very like dissolving. It's all encompassing. It's not super defined. And so as the moon goes into Pisces today, I think this is going to be a little bit more positive, where we get to kind of explore the emotional dynamic of what's going on. It's kind of like wherever the moon's at, a lot of the light is being focused to. Now, the sun is more of like the more main light where, everything's kind of revolving around, but the moon oftentimes lights up what we don't always see. And so while the moon is in Pisces, this is giving us an opportunity to really kind of look at all of this stuff. Like, we haven't had a chance to look at it for the past month, since the moon hasn't been in Pisces in, 29 days? So as the moon's in Pisces conjoining where Venus is now in Pisces, Mercury's direct on top of Neptune, I think as we go from Monday into Tuesday with the moon being in Pisces, this is giving us an opportunity to get a lot more clear on an emotional level of what we feel about all of this stuff. Mercury retrograde came in on top of Neptune. We had to switch some things up in that area. We're still kind of trying to, find our way through that. It's still a little bit unsure or unclear. It's still a little bit foggy. But as Venus is now in Pisces as well too, I think this is more about going, let's not worry too much about things not being clear, but let's worry more about what do I value more? Like, things may be foggy, things may be clear, which way do I want to go? If you can't see if you can't see what's in front of you, what's stopping you from choosing any way that you would want to go? You know what I mean? So as the moon goes through Pisces, I think this is just going to be a big time to feel all this stuff. Mercury's going to be on top of Neptune as well, starting off on Monday. So expect to start this week still a little bit foggy, still a little bit blurry. But as Mercury starts to move away from Neptune and eventually make it square with Jupiter, I think things are going to start to clear up, but we just got to give it some more time. And I know this has been like the longest, everyone in the whole world is ready for Mercury to get out of Pisces and to get away from Neptune, but it's still going on. Anyway, as we move into Tuesday, the moon is going to be, or Tuesday, what is that, April 2nd? We're going to be having the moon conjoin Neptune, and it's going to also conjoin Mercury. Where yesterday on Monday, when we had the moon conjoining Venus, I think this is more about, you know, where do I want to go? What do I really value? What's calling out to me right now? The moon being on top of Mercury and Neptune is kind of like, you know, even though you're still in the wishy-washy part of stuff, you're kind of going with the ebb and the flow of things to kind of like, you know, hey, is this working for me or is this working for me? Is this where I want to go or is this where I want to go? Mercury, you know, again, I've been using the word pictures and images and visions and, you know, what are you creating in your head? What kind of imagery are you creating? And I think this is just a good time to really kind of sit there and reflect on it and sit there and look at it. You know, what image are you creating in this situation? What image are you creating in that situation? And what's not clear? What is clear? And it's not so much about, oh, I need to find the clarity. Right now, it's just more about kind of getting a perspective of the picture in front of you. Because then, as we move into Wednesday on April 3rd, that's when we're going to have the moon enter Aries. Now, that's kind of like the only thing that's really going on Wednesday, but what's important is that the moon's getting out of, you know, Pisces, where like, seems to be like all of the planets are right now. But as the moon goes into Aries, we start the new moon. The new moon's not going to actually perfect till Friday, but as the moon goes into Aries, I think this is more of a mentally charged attitude of like, okay, I see where I felt, I see where I valued about all of this stuff that didn't make sense. What is my plan of action now? Where do I need to take initiative and drive? And as the moon is starting to be in the same sign as the sun, we're not going to be able to see it at this point. I think this is a lot of kind of like, you know, it's not about pulling the trigger at this moment, but it's kind of like, you know, creating more tension, pulling the bow back, you know, pulling more and more and more and more. I think a good way to put it as well would be kind of like, this isn't a time to necessarily initiate, confrontate, or anything like that. It's about going, what are my intentions with this confrontation? What are my intentions with, you know, pushing these things forward? And as the moon goes through Aries, I think this is just going to be a charged up time to really reflect on, hey, where do I want to pursue? Where do I really want to go? What do I feel comfortable in, and where am I emotionally charged up in right now? And don't forget as well, Mars is now in Gemini. So with the moon being in Aries, the sun being in Aries, let's look at, you know, Mars. Mars is in Gemini. Mars is, you know, getting a lot of information right now. Mars is kind of looking to change up its energy, kind of go, you know, is this more of my route or is this more of my route? You know, kind of like, again, I hit on this in my monthly horoscopes, but it's like the jack of all trades, master of none. Getting, you know, knowing a steady enough of information to get away with things, but not being an expert in anything. Mars in Gemini is kind of like, let's do this and this, not, you know, this or this in a sense. So while the moon is in Aries, the sun's in Aries, this is just a reflect on like, hey, am I initiating this way or am I initiating this way or this thing? Now, as we move into Thursday, Thursday's, it's not the biggest day in the world, but the South Node's going to be on top of Pluto. And this is very, you know, this is Pluto that we're talking about. Like, Pluto's the very, very last planet. The South Node is a mathematical point. It's just showing where the eclipses are. Like, don't hold this as like, this is how Thursday's going to be, but the South Node is like what we're wanting to release, what we're wanting to get away from. Like, the South Node is kind of like this energy of like what we've brought with us and what have we brought with us that's going to lead us to our future and that we've got to leave behind in order to get to where we want to go. And as this is on top of Pluto, it's like we've brought a lot of like, you know, baggage. We've brought a lot of like just Pluto stuff. Like, it's not pretty. It's not, you know, good. But what have we learned through this, you know, Pluto and Capricorn transit through, you know, wherever that's at in your house? What have we learned through that? And what are we willing to let go of? And what are we willing to, you know, redefine for ourselves or restructure for ourselves? And this is going to be on a deep level. And this is going to show up later on this summer when we have the eclipses. So just keep in mind about that stuff. And as Saturn finally goes into the last decan of Capricorn, it's going to later retrograde, I believe, at 20 degrees Capricorn, maybe 21 degrees. Anyway, as Saturn kind of peeks its way into there and starts to get really close to Pluto, this is about like the closest to Pluto it's going to get at the moment. This is kind of like intensifying the energy of like Pluto and Capricorn, of like this huge, deep transformation that's kind of going on in that area of your, you know, of your life, wherever that's at in your chart. And Saturn's coming closer going, we need to get a handle on this situation. We need to address this. We need to, you know, put some discipline and have some authority over this and really kind of get it figured out. So as Saturn gets closer and closer, and it's going to, you know, retrograde back and then move forward until, you know, I believe like the middle, this time 2020 is when Saturn will get out of Capricorn and move into Aquarius. And during this next basically year, like, this is kind of like getting a handle and addressing all of these Pluto situations that are going on in your chart. And the South Node right now on Thursday is kind of like, hey, what do you need to leave behind and what's important that you want to, you know, redefine for yourself moving forward. But then as we go into Friday, Friday is going to be the more fun day because we're going to have the new moon in Aries. Now, this is positive, but there's a few things to this that you need to remember. So with the new moon in Aries, this is positive because it's trining Jupiter. And this, I mean, a new moon, you guys know with the drill, it's about resetting intentions. It's about focusing the energy on one area of your chart. And I talked a lot about this new moon in my monthly horoscopes, just because we're having, you know, another full moon in Libra coming up after this. However, a new moon's time to reflect on that area of your chart and what does that mean for you. This is about, you know, identity. This is about, you know, confrontation. This is about initiation. This is about things like, what am I doing? What am I capable of? What am I worthy of? What can I do versus what can't I do? And this isn't to necessarily go, I can do anything in the world and blah, 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 blah. It's trining Jupiter during this new moon. And I think that's important because Jupiter's trying to show you a bigger image. Jupiter's going, you know, you thinking more positive thoughts, you expanding yourself in your philosophy, that's Jupiter and Sagittarius, like that's healthy. And what is that looking like? And as Jupiter's trining this new moon, this is kind of like, you know, what is that Jupiter and Sagittarius transit brought to you as far as, you know, philosophy, your beliefs, what you've seen, what you've experienced, what your vision is. It's kind of like Jupiter's like, you know, that vision that you've had in the back of your mind, maybe it's time to initiate that right now. The only problem I see with this new moon is that it's squaring Saturn basically exactly. This isn't necessarily not good, but this is, you know, the new, you may want to you may be charged up, you may be wanting to go and just, you know, this Jupiter's just, you know, and getting you all excited. Saturn says no to things, like that's what malefics do, the bad planets. They say no to things, but Saturn's saying what obstacles and walls are in your way that you have to face. And this isn't about going, I'm so charged up, I can, you know, conquer these walls and everything like that. It's about going, what actual, you know, things are in your way and what do you have to, where do you have to discipline your energy? Where do you have to like be exact and be serious about going about these things? Because it's not like you can just be pumped up on this philosophical high of you can do anything. Like Saturn squaring this is like, that high is going to be there of like, you can do it, but you're going to actually have to climb and face a pretty big challenge. And I mean, this isn't new. Saturn's been in Capricorn for a while. You know what this looks like in your life. You know what this looks like in your chart. You know, this is just about going, hey, like, if I want to tear down this wall, this Saturn and Capricorn, if I want to redefine what this looks like and restructure this, I've got to take it on, head on, that Aries stuff, and I've got to believe that I have the capability in doing that. And I think that's the Jupiter trine right there. Now, as we move forward into this weekend on Saturday and Sunday, we have the moon going into Taurus and conjoining Uranus. And I think this is going to be a little bit exciting now that, you know, Uranus is in Taurus. I just think anytime the moon's in Taurus with Uranus, even though a lot of people are like, I think it's still a little bit exciting. However, as the moon goes into Taurus, where it's wanting to create stability, where it's wanting to create a foundation and security and create luxury and create value, the moon's going to be on top of Uranus, where, like, this is Uranus and Taurus now, like, where do we have to be innovative? Where do we have to be creative? Where do we have to liberate ourselves from things that we could be stubborn and fixated upon that, you know, we need to change in order, not necessarily in order for anything, but change for the better. Change because it's nicer. Change because it works better for us. And then as we move into, that's on Saturday on the 6th, and then as we move into Sunday, we have, you know, the moon sextiling Venus and Mercury, and it's also going to be trining Saturn. And I think this is important because as I've been talking about with, you know, the Pisces energy, it's kind of like everything's confusing, but you know that you need to initiate stuff, you need to start stuff. The moon in Taurus sextiling Venus and Mercury and trining Saturn is kind of like getting the puzzle pieces slowly but surely together. It's like, you know, you're moving at your own pace. You're definitely not in, you know, a hurry or anything like that, but the pieces will slowly start kind of coming together in that sense. But then as we go into Monday on April 8th, by the time we get back to this video next week, we have the moon going into Gemini and it's going to be conjoining Mars. And I think this is kind of like important because as the moon goes into Gemini, it's like, you know, what are my options? What are people telling me? Well, you know, what's the information I'm given? What do I need to communicate? What am I being communicated, you know, with? Like, what are people telling me? And as it conjoins Mars at this time where Mars is, you know, all about action and energy, but he also severs, he cuts, he inflammates. That's kind of Mars's job. And as the moon's on top of Mars, I think this is a good time to go like, hey, you know, with all of this Pisces stuff that's kind of confusing and all of this Jupiter stuff that's making this way more idealistic and way more of a bigger deal than, you know, you may feel like it needs to be, the moon being on top of Mars is like what, you know, not necessarily making a decision on the information, but getting the information the way that you need it to, you know? Moon on top of Mars is kind of like, yeah, you may be a little bit irritated or frustrated with some of the information that you get, but that's the information and you have to kind of like, you know, decide from there. You kind of have to keep exploring both sides. You kind of have to keep moving forward with it, even though you may not like it. And the reason I bring this up is later on this month, Mars is going to be opposing Jupiter. And I think this is going to be a big time about going, you know, this is what I'm doing, and this is all of, you know, the irons I have in the fire. This is all of the different avenues that I can go down. This is what I'm exploring. This is what I'm putting my energy into. Jupiter is going to later oppose Mars, where it's kind of like, okay, pick one though. You've got to decide and go for it. And that's basically this week. I think this week ends very chill, but as we move into next week, we've got Venus conjoining Neptune, we've got Jupiter stationing retrograde, and we have Mercury and Venus squaring Jupiter. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that. Next week is going to have a lot of energy with this Venus and Pisces stuff and this Jupiter and Sag stuff, where the ball is going to start to roll a little bit faster with that stuff. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching and liking and sharing and commenting and subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you guys, and I will be seeing you next week.